Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 12 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6. And today we're starting chapter 5, which is titled Narada Muni Cursed by Prajapati Daksha. Let us begin with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschitya Dejatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyas Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Yes. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 5. Narada Muni cursed by Prajapati Daksha. And well, there's a chapter introduction actually. Let me just read one sentence of that, just so we have a little perspective on what's coming. So Prabhupada says, this chapter relates how all the sons of Daksha were delivered from the clutches of the material energy by following the advice of Narada, who was therefore cursed by Daksha. Yes, okay, so there are 7 sections here. First section is from verse 1 to verse 3. The 10,000 Haryashvas are ordered by Daksha to procreate. These 10,000 Haryashvas, they're the sons of Daksha. Right, so that's the first section. Second section is from verse 4 to verse 9. The Haryashvas meet Narada Muni. And then third section, verse 10 to verse 21. They consider Narada's instructions and renounce. Fourth section is just verse 22. Narada Muni departs. Then the fifth section, verse 23 to verse 28, Daksha produces the 1,000 Savalashvas, another group of sons for procreating. Then the sixth section, from verse 20 to verse 33, Narada preaches to the Savalashvas. Then the seventh section, verse 34 to verse 44, Daksha curses Narada Muni. Yes, for preaching to these 2 groups of sons. First group 10,000, second group 1,000. And Narada Muni made them all not just devotees in the broad sense, but renunciates. Yeah, who were just not going to accept household life at all. And yeah, so they became basically like sannyasis, you could say. Right, so the first section then, verse 1 to verse 3, the 10,000 Haryashvas ordered by Daksha to procreate. So, yeah, there's just the 3 verses and none of them have purports, so we just read straight through. Verse 1, Srila Shukadev Goswami continued, impelled by the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, Prajapati Daksha begot 10,000 sons in the womb of Panchajani, Asikni. My dear king, these sons were called the Haryashvas. So the mother, Asikni, was introduced to him by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just at the end, more or less at the end of chapter 4. So verse 2, my dear king, all the sons of Prajapati Daksha were alike in being very gentle and obedient to the orders of their father. When their father ordered them to beget children, they all went in the western direction. Verse 3. In the west, where the river Sindhu meets the sea, there is a great place of pilgrimage known as Narayana Saras. Many sages and others advanced in spiritual consciousness live there. So on to the second section, and let's have a look. Well, you know what? There's only one purport in the whole section. I'm going to read straight through again. So this is from verse 4 to verse 9. The Haryashvas meet Narada Muni. First of all, verses 4 and 5. In that holy place, the Haryashvas began regularly touching the lake's waters and bathing in them. Gradually becoming very much purified, they became inclined toward the activities of Paramahamsas. Nevertheless, because their father had ordered them to increase the population, they performed severe austerities to fulfill his desires. One day when the great sage Narada saw those boys performing such fine austerities to increase the population, Narada approached them. And verses 6 to 8, the great sage Narada said, my dear Haryashvas, you have not seen the extremities of the earth. There is a kingdom where only one man lives, and where there is a hole from which, having entered, no one emerges. A woman there who is extremely unchaste adorns herself with various attractive dresses, and the man who lives there is her husband. In that kingdom, there is a river flowing in both directions, a wonderful home made of 25 materials, a swan that vibrates various sounds, and an automatically revolving object made of sharp razors and thunderbolts. You have not seen all this, and therefore you're inexperienced boys without advanced knowledge. How then will you create progeny? Yes, so there's a purport here. Prabhupada says that Narada saw that the Haryashvas were already purified through living in that holy place, and they're practically ready for liberation, so what's the need for them to become householders? Because as per the analogy used there, that it's so dark in household life, actually, that's the idea. It's so dark that having entered, you can't escape. So through analogy, he asked them why they should follow their father's order. And you know, one householder, a very senior householder, and very serious devotee, he has been married for well over, it's like coming up to 30 years, something like that. And he told me just not long ago, maybe a month ago or so, he said, yes, you know, household life, it looks attractive, it sounds like it's attractive and nice. But he said, it's actually a booby trap. If you know what a booby trap is. It's a trap for boobs. I mean, stupid people. Yeah. Looks very nice, so people get into it. But when they're in it, then, as Prabhupada says here, they can't escape. Yeah, and then they find that it's not easy at all. Particularly when children come, it's really not easy. So anyway, indirectly, Narada asked them to find the super soul in the heart, and then they'd become truly experienced. So in other words, a person who's too involved materially and who doesn't really look deep inside his heart is increasingly entangled in Maya. So Narada wanted to get them into spiritual realization. And actually Prahlad gave the same advice to his father in Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.5. Tat sadhu manye suravarya dehinam sada samudvigna diyam asadgrahat hitvatma patam griham andakupam vanam gato yad darim ashrayeta, which means, in the dark well of family life, one is always full of anxiety because of having accepted a temporary body. If one wants to free himself from this anxiety, one should immediately leave family life and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Vrindavan. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Narada Muni advised the Haryashvas not to enter household life, since they were already advanced in spiritual knowledge. Why should they be entangled in that way? And verse 9, Alas, Narada again, alas, your father is omniscient, but you do not know his actual order. Without knowing the actual purpose of your father, how will you create progeny? So the third section, they consider Narada's instructions and renounce. From verse 10 to verse 21. Right, so here we will read through the verses and then come back. Verse 10, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, hearing these enigmatic words of Narada Muni, the Haryashvas considered them with their natural intelligence, without help from others. Verse 11. The Haryashvas understood the meaning of Narada's words as follows. The word Bhu, the earth, refers to the field of activities. The material body, which is a result of the living being's actions, is this field of activities, and it gives him false designations. Since time immemorial, he has received various types of material bodies, which are the roots of bondage to the material world. If one foolishly engages in temporary fruitive activities and does not look toward the cessation of this bondage, what will be the benefit of his actions? Verse 12. Narada Muni had said that there's a kingdom where there's only one male. The Haryashvas realized the purport of this statement. So the only enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who observes everything everywhere. He's full of six opulences and fully independent of everyone else. He's never subject to the three modes of material nature, for he is always transcendental to this material creation. If the members of human society do not understand him, the Supreme, through their advancement in knowledge and activities, but simply work very hard like cats and dogs all day and night for temporary happiness, what will be the benefit of their activities? Okay, verse 13. Narada Muni had described that there is a bila, or hole, from which, having entered, one does not return. The Haryashvas understood the meaning of this allegory. So hardly once has a person who has entered the lower planetary system called Patala, so hardly once has such a person been seen to return. Similarly, if one enters the Vaikuntha Dham, Pratyagdhama, he does not return to this material world. If there is such a place from which, having gone, one does not return to the miserable material condition of life, what is the use of jumping like monkeys in the temporary material world and not seeing or understanding that place? What will be the profit? Verse 14. Narada Muni had described a woman who is a professional prostitute. The Haryashvas understood the identity of this woman. So mixed with the mode of passion, the unsteady intelligence of every living entity is like a prostitute who changes dresses just to attract one's attention. If one fully engages in temporary fruitive activities, not understanding how this is taking place, what does he actually gain? Verse 15. Narada Muni had also spoken of a man who is the husband of the prostitute. The Haryashvas understood this as follows. If one becomes the husband of a prostitute, he loses all independence. Similarly, if a living entity has polluted intelligence, he prolongs his materialistic life. Frustrated by material nature, he must follow the movements of the intelligence, which brings various conditions of happiness and distress. If one performs fruitive activities under such conditions, what will be the benefit? Verse 16. Narada Muni had said that there is a river flowing in both directions. The Haryashvas understood the purport of this statement. Material nature functions in two ways, by creation and dissolution. Thus the river of material nature flows both ways. A living entity who unknowingly falls in this river is submerged in its waves, and since the current is swifter near the banks of the river, he is unable to get out. What will be the benefit of performing fruitive activities in that river of Maya? Verse 17. Narada Muni had said that there is a house made of 25 elements. The Haryashvas understood this analogy. The Supreme Lord is the reservoir of the 25 elements, and as the Supreme Being, the conductor of cause and effect, he causes their manifestation. If one engages in temporary fruitive activities, not knowing that Supreme Person, what benefit will he derive? Verse 18. Narada Muni had spoken of a swan. That swan is explained in this verse. The Vedic literatures, Shastras, vividly describe how to understand the Supreme Lord, the source of all material and spiritual energy. Indeed, they elaborately explain these two energies. The swan, Hamsa, is one who discriminates between matter and spirit, who accepts the essence of everything, and who explains the meaning of bondage and the means of liberation. The words of scriptures consist of variegated vibrations. If a foolish rascal leaves aside the study of these shastras to engage in temporary activities, what will be the result? Verse 19. Narada Muni had spoken of a physical object made of sharp blades and thunderbolts. The Haryashvas understood this allegory as follows. Eternal time moves very sharply, as if made of razors and thunderbolts. Uninterrupted and fully independent, it drives the activities of the entire world. If one does not try to study the eternal element of time, what benefit can he derive from performing temporary material activities? Verse 20. Narada Muni had asked how one could ignorantly defy one's own father. The Haryashvas understood the meaning of this question. One must accept the original instructions of the Shastra. According to Vedic civilization, one is offered a sacred thread as a sign of second birth. One takes his second birth by dint of having received instructions in the Shastra from a bona fide spiritual master. Therefore, Shastra, scripture, is the real father. All the Shastras instruct that one should end his material way of life. If one does not know the purpose of the Father's orders, the Shastras, he is ignorant. The words of a material father who endeavors to engage his son in material activities are not the real instructions of the Father. Verse 21. Shukadev Goswami continued, "My dear king, after hearing the instructions of Narada, the Haryashvas, the sons of Prajapati Daksha, were firmly convinced. They all believed in his instructions and reached the same conclusion. Having accepted him as their spiritual master, they circumambulated that great sage and followed the path by which one never returns to this world." So this is the third section from verse 10 to verse 21. And it's they means the Haryashvas consider Narada's instructions and renounce. I'm actually going to change that. Not just they, but the Haryashvas. Okay. So here we go, devotees. Verse 10. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, hearing these enigmatic words of Narada Muni, the Haryashvas considered them with their natural intelligence without help from others. So as we'll see, and if you were listening to the verses, the Haryashvas, practically every verse, they're understanding more and more deeply this analogy that Narada Muni has given of the material world and what happens to people in it and, what it's like, etc. Right, so verse 10, there's no purport. We go on to verse 11. The Haryashvas understood the meaning of Narada's words as follows. The word bhu, the earth, refers to the field of activities. The material body, which is a result of the living being's actions, is his field of activities, and it gives him false designations. Since time immemorial, he has received various types of material bodies, which are the roots of bondage to the material world. If one foolishly engages in temporary fruitive activities and does not look toward the cessation of this bondage, what will be the benefit of his actions? Right, so let's look at the purport here. So Narada has spoken to the Haryashvas about 10 allegorical subjects. The king, the kingdom, the river, the house, the physical elements, and so forth. That's just some of them. So after considering these, the Haryashvas understood that the living entity wants happiness in this world, but is not interested in liberation. This is a very important verse. So of course all living entities here are very active, working day and night for sense gratification like hogs and dogs. And the animals and all other conditioned living entities here, they do all sorts of things without knowledge of the soul in the body. But in the human form, we have the opportunity, and we must get out of this encagement. But without the instructions of Narada Muni or his representative in disciplic succession, it's not possible. It just doesn't happen. We see it just doesn't happen. People just get caught up in temporary happiness and don't know how to become free. Second paragraph, the Haryashvas immediately understood the purport of Narada Muni's instructions. And this Krishna consciousness movement is meant for such enlightenment and enlivenment. So we try to enlighten people so they understand that if you want to work hard in tapasya, in austerity, for self-realization and liberation. Otherwise, Maya is very strong and is expert in putting impediments in the way of the aspiring candidate. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore sometimes one comes to the Krishna consciousness movement, but again falls into the clutches of Maya, not understanding the importance of this movement. Verse 12, Narada Muni had said that there's a kingdom where there's only one male. The Haryashvas realized the purport of the statement. So the only enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who observes everything everywhere. He's full of 6 opulences and fully independent of everyone else. He's never subject to the 3 modes of material nature, because he's always transcendental to this material creation. If the members of human society do not understand him, the Supreme, through their advancement in knowledge and activities, but simply work very hard like cats and dogs all day and night for temporary happiness, what will be the benefit of their activities? So Narada Muni had mentioned there's a kingdom with one king, no competitor, and that's the spiritual world. Only one proprietor and enjoyer, who's the Lord. And he's Turiya. He's on the 4th platform, or in the 4th dimension, transcendental. And he's also described as Abhava, doesn't take birth. This comes from the term bhu, to be. Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 verse 19 says, bhu bhutva praliyate. The living entities in the material world must be repeatedly born and destroyed. But the Lord is neither bhutva nor praliyate. He's eternal, not obliged to take birth like us and die like us. He's not subject to changes of body, and anyone who thinks that he is a fool. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 11, avajananti mam mudha. the mudhas think the Lord has come and just taken a body. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Narada Muni advises that human beings not waste their time simply jumping like cats and monkeys without real benefit. The duty of the human being is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 13. Narada Muni had described that there is a bila, or hole, from which, having entered, one does not return. The Haryashvas understood the meaning of this allegory. So, hardly once has a person who has entered the lower planetary systems called Patala, hardly once has such a person been seen to return. They just get caught there and caught and just caught. Similarly, if one enters the Vaikuntha Dham, Pratyag Dham, he does not return to this material world. If there is such a place from which, having gone, one does not return to the miserable material condition of life, what is the use of jumping like monkeys in the temporary material world and not seeing or understanding that place? What will be the profit? So, Prabhupada explains that Bhagavad Gita chapter 15 verse 6 talks about that region from which, having gone, one doesn't return to the material world. Tadama paramam mama. That place where there's no need for light or electricity. That's the Lord's supreme abode. Tadama paramam mama. Yes, so once you've gone there, don't return to this world. And Prabhupada also refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 9, famous verse, which we mentioned, I think, yesterday regularly. We mention, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha, tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Second paragraph. If we properly understand Krishna, we don't return here after giving up this body. This is described in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Puma naivati yad gatva. He goes back to Godhead. So, good question. Why do people not care for this? What will be the benefit of taking birth here again as a human or a demigod or cat or dog? Why waste time like this? Well, of course, the unfortunate fact is that even though people get exposed to this type of knowledge, in one way or another, some of them get Prabhupada's books. Others, even just like Christians, they've heard about heaven. They don't understand it clearly, but they've definitely heard about it. This place which is much nicer than here. But they're not so interested usually. That's the problem, ignorance. So Krishna asserts in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse 15, Mamupetya punarjanma dukalayam shashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one's real concern should be to free himself from the repetition of birth and death and attain the topmost perfection of life by living with the Supreme King in the spiritual world. In these verses, the sons of Daksha repeatedly say, Kim asat karma bir bhavet. What is the use of impermanent, fruitive activities? Verse 14, Narada Muni had described a woman who's a professional prostitute. The Haryashvas understood the identity of this woman. Mixed with the motive passion, the unsteady intelligence of every living entity is like a prostitute who changes dresses just to attract one's attention. If one fully engages in temporary fruitive activities, not understanding how this is taking place, what does he actually gain? So, a husbandless woman may say she's independent, she can do what she likes, but it means she's become a prostitute. And prostitutes dress to attract men's attention to the lower part of her body. Now they almost go naked to draw attention of men like this. This is the intelligence of a professional prostitute. Similarly, the intelligence of a living entity who does not turn his attention to Krishna or the Krishna consciousness movement simply changes dress like a prostitute. So what's the benefit of that sort of intelligence? We need to be intelligent to not change the body. I mean, at least into another material body, we should be intelligent enough to give up this body and go back to Godhead. Second paragraph, the karmis change profession from time to time. Many of them do. But the Krishna conscious person doesn't do that. His only profession is to attract Krishna's attention by chanting Hare Krishna and living a simple life without daily changes of fashion. You know, once, quite many years ago, like 15, maybe 20, it's possible, I was in the old Durban airport, which was close to our Chatsworth temple. That was so convenient. Anyway, I was there waiting for a flight, probably to Johannesburg, and one business person came up and looked at me and looked at my clothes and said, yeah, I guess using this type of clothing makes it easier to decide every morning what you're going to wear. And I agreed, yes, you're right. Simplifies life. Right. So in the Krishna consciousness movement, there's only one fashion to dress as a Vaishnav with shaved head and tilak. And we're taught to always be clean in mind, in dress, in eating, in body, to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, what's the use of changing dress? Sometimes long hair, sometimes a beard, and different types of clothes. This is not good. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one should not waste his time in such frivolous activities. One should always be fixed in Krishna consciousness and take the cure of devotional service with firm determination. Verse 15. Narada Muni had also spoken of a man who is the husband of the prostitute. The Haryashvas understood this as follows, that if one becomes the husband of a prostitute, he loses all independence. Similarly, if a living entity has polluted intelligence, he prolongs his materialistic life. Frustrated by material nature, he must follow the movements of the intelligence, which brings various conditions of happiness and distress. If one performs fruitive activities under such conditions, what will be the benefit? Okay, so it's kind of overflowing a bit from the previous verse and purport. So the polluted intelligence is compared to a prostitute. We know about that from the previous verse. One who has not got purified, intelligence, is said to be controlled by a prostitute. So Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 41, Vyavasayatmaka buddhir ekeha kurunandana, says that those who are serious have one kind of intelligence, ekaya, Krishna conscious intelligence. Otherwise, one who's not fixed in intelligence finds many modes of life, subject to happiness and distress. If a man is the husband of a prostitute, he can't be happy. Similarly, one who follows the dictates of materialistic intelligence and consciousness will never be happy. Second paragraph, we have to understand the activities of material nature. Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 verse 27 says, do you know that verse? You should know it. It's another one of these important verses. Prakrite kriyamanani gunais karamani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. So, but the thing is, although the person is following the dictations of material nature, do this, you must do that, you can't do something else, but he thinks he's the master of the material nature. An example Prabhupada gives is the scientists, who they're trying to become masters of material nature, but they don't care to understand the Lord. They try to be masters of material nature, but they're imitation gods. And they say and they think and they hope that scientific advancement will help them avoid the control of God. But actually they're forced to associate with the prostitute of polluted intelligence and take different bodies. So Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita 13:22, Purusha prakriti stohi bhunkte prakriti janganan karanam gunasangosya sadasadyoni janmasu. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil amongst various species. A very mixed experience in material life. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if one fully engages in temporary fruitive activities and does not solve this real problem, what profit will he gain? Verse 16. Narada Muni had said that there's a river flowing in both directions. The Haryashvas understood the purport of this statement. Right, so material nature functions in two ways, by creation and dissolution. Thus the river of material nature flows both ways. A living entity who unknowingly falls in this river is submerged in its ways. And since the current is swifter near the banks of the river, he's unable to get out. What will be the benefit of performing fruitive activities in that river of Maya? So the purport: a person may be submerged in the river of Maya, but one can get free by coming to the banks of knowledge and austerity. But the problem is, as the verse says, near the banks, the waves are stronger. So if one doesn't understand how the waves are tossing him, but just engages in fruitive activities, what benefit will he derive? Second paragraph, Brahma Samhita, verse 55 says, the Maya Shakti Durga is in charge of Srishti Stiti Pralaya, creation and dissolution, and she acts under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Maya Jakshena Prakriti Suyate Saha Characharam. When one falls in the river of nescience, he's always tossed around, but the same Maya can save him when he surrenders to Krishna. Third paragraph, to get freedom from material life, you have to take to Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, by advancement of science, what are you going to achieve? A faster computer, a bigger television, faster motor car. If you're carried away by the waves of nature, what does it mean to be a big scientist or philosopher? So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, mundane science and philosophy are also material creations. We must understand how Maya works and how one can be released from the tossing waves of the river of nescience. That is one's first duty. Our first duty is to understand. If we don't understand, how can we act properly? Verse 17, Narada Muni had said that there's a house made of 25 elements. The Haryashvas understood this analogy. The Supreme Lord is the reservoir of the 25 elements, and as the Supreme Being, the conductor of cause and effect, he causes their manifestation. If one engages in temporary fruitive activities, not knowing that Supreme Person, what benefit will he derive? So the philosophers and scientists, they're trying to find the original cause, but they're doing it whimsically, or they're making up sort of fantastic theories. The actual science, the actual resource for knowledge of the original cause it's the Vedic literatures. Atato Brahma Jigyasa Janmad Yasya Yataha. Vedanta Sutra explains one should inquire about Brahman, the Supreme Soul. This is Brahma Jigyas. So the absolute truth, or tattva, is explained in the Bhagavatam 1-11. Vedanti tattva vidas, tattvam yajjnanam advayam, brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Which means the learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. So it appears that same absolute truth, that one absolute truth, appears to neophyte as the impersonal Brahman, to advanced mystics as the Supersoul, but to the devotees who are more advanced, they understand the absolute truth as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Second paragraph. So this whole material cosmic manifestation is an expansion of the energies of Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu. And Prabhupada refers to Vishnu Purana 122.52. I'll just read the translation, Whatever we see in this world is but an expansion of various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is like a fire that spreads illumination for a long distance, although it's situated in one place. That's Vishnu Purana 122.52. So that's what this material world is, an expansion of the Lord's energies. So what's the use, Prabhupada says, of demanding recognition as a big scientist if you don't find the supreme cause, but rather you just get involved in fruitive activity? So if one doesn't know the ultimate cause, what's the use of his scientific knowledge? Third paragraph. The original person, the Purusha, can be understood only by devotional service. And Prabhupada again quotes 1855 Bhagavad Gita, only by devotional service one can understand him. He quotes that regularly. So we have to try to understand that the material elements, they're separated from the Lord and they're inferior energy of the Lord. Whereas we, the living entities, we're spiritual energy. So whatever we experience is just a combination of these two energies, inferior and superior. And we have to study about creation, maintenance, distraction of this world. What is this world? Very much in depth. And what is also that permanent place, which when you go to it, you don't return from it to here. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, human society should study this, but instead of culturing such knowledge, people are attracted to temporary happiness and sense gratification, culminating in bottomless, topless passion. There is no profit in such activities. One must engage himself in the Krishna consciousness movement. Right, verse 18. Narada Muni had spoken of a swan. That swan is explained in this verse. The Vedic literatures, Shastras, vividly describe how to understand the Supreme Lord, the source of all material and spiritual energy. Indeed, they elaborately explain these two energies. The swan, Hamsa, is one who discriminates between matter and spirit, who accepts the essence of everything, and who explains the means of bondage and the means of liberation. The words of scriptures consist of variegated vibrations. If a foolish rascal leaves aside the study of these Shastras to engage in temporary activities, what will be the result? So Prabhupada explains that this movement is presenting Vedic literatures in so many languages, and but the problem is the leaders in the West are like idols of modern civilization because of there's some advancement scientifically, etc. But a sane man can see all this has nothing to do with eternal life. Of course, and the world is imitating the Westerners. In India, so much. So therefore the Krishna consciousness movement is giving Westerners knowledge of Vedic literatures in Western languages. And then all those people are imitating the Westerners. Eventually they'll take up that transcendental knowledge. So the word viviktapadam refers to the path of logical discourse about the aim of life. And if someone doesn't study this, he's going to be in darkness. So what's the benefit of just this westernized knowledge, just different aspects of ignorance? Yeah. Verse 19. Narada Muni had spoken of a physical object made of sharp blades and thunderbolts. The Haryashvas understood this allegory as follows. Eternal time moves very sharply as if made of razors and thunderbolts. Uninterrupted and fully independent, it drives the activities of the entire world. If one does not try to study the eternal element of time, what benefit can he derive from performing temporary material activities? Yes, so this verse is explaining the words Shaurapavyam Swayam Brahmi from verse 8 of this chapter, which refers to the orbit of eternal time. And Prabhupada says, Chanakya makes the point that if you lose even 1 second, one just moment like that of your lifetime, you can't get it back for millions of dollars, billions, trillions. So therefore, we must be careful not to waste any of our time, particularly living like animals do. Yeah, this is great foolishness. So time here is compared to a razor. A razor is meant for shaving the face, but if you're not careful with it, oh, Krishna, you can get cut very badly. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one is advised not to create a disaster by misusing his lifetime. One should be extremely careful to utilize the span of his life for spiritual realization or Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.